All right, saints of God, you're to be fed. Jesus Christ is our great shepherd. And the shepherd has a lot of responsibilities to guide the sheep, to heal the sheep when they get injured, protect the sheep from predators, but also to feed the sheep. And that's what he has in front of us. He wants to feed your soul. So let's turn our Bibles to Genesis chapter 39. Life skills. It's really important for us parents to teach our children life skills, right? High schools now kind of regularly have life skill classes where they learn about how to time management and money management, communication skills. How can you live life successfully without learning how to manage time well or communicate well or money management? You just can't.
How about this? How can you live life well if you can't handle troubles well? No, you can't. The bumper sticker says, life is hard and then you die. That's pretty much biblical, right? God does not promise us that it's going to be smooth sailing. It's going to be hard, he says down here, and then we'll die and we'll be with him. And that means we've got to learn how to handle unpleasant circumstances in this world well. We've got to learn how to hold on during difficult times, right? I mean, we got to teach our kids that. We need to be taught that because we're all facing those all the time. What if we could do one better than that? Not just how to hold on during hard circumstances, but how to grow stronger during hard circumstances. That would be a skill to master, right? Well, we're looking through the Bible in a series of sermons at people who had difficulties and what they did right. Skills they used to grow strong in the hardships of life. We're not only going to look at what they did right, but some of the people what they did wrong, so we can learn not to go that path. But last week we started looking at this at what is possibly one of the hardest unpleasant circumstances in the Bible, which was God commanding Abraham to kill his own son. This week we're going to look at what is possibly the most unpleasant hardship in the Bible, and that is Joseph being sold as a slave by his own brothers. Why would God allow that to happen? We said last week, God only allows his people to experience hardships in order to make them, do you remember? Strong. Strong. That's the only reason he allows it. You had hardship this week? God could have stopped that. Why did he do that? Because his plan is through that hardship and the experience and your reaction and everything is to make you strong. That's why he does it. He can stop them all, and he stops so many. But the ones he doesn't stop, on purpose, he's trying to make you strong. It says in Hebrews 12:11, no discipline or hardship seems pleasant at the time. Yeah, we know that. But painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. So if you experienced hardship last week, it was because God was seeking to make you strong. And does that happen to everybody that hardship takes place to? No. What does it say? Only to those who've been trained by it. See, a hardship can come along and we say, no, I don't want this, and we kick and we scream and we fight and we complain and we gripe our way through it, and we're not growing stronger. It's a waste of time because the purpose was that we go with it, respond the right way, even though that's really hard, and we come out a stronger person. Today we're going to be looking at skills to learn how to respond the right way so that we do become better people. Not just hold on, but actually grow stronger through the hardships. Today we're going to look at 4 life skills from the life of Joseph. 4 life skills from the life of Joseph. We know the story, but let God speak to you. Let God feed your soul. Ask God right now, just as we start. Speak to me, I'm listening. He'll speak to you. So, 4 hardships from the life of Joseph. He became strong through his hardships, and so can you. Let's see what he did right. Now, if you remember the life of Joseph, he grew up in a family of 12 brothers, and he was the favorite son, if you remember that. And one day his father sent him to find his brothers who were out tending the sheep and report back on how they were doing. And as he walks into the camp where they are, they assault him, tie him up, throw him in a pit, and intend to kill him. It seems they were not real wild about his being his father's favorite, and getting the fancy coat, and staying behind when they had to go out into the wilderness with the sheep. And by the way, please let that make sure that you know to kill favoritism in your family. It is ugly, it is destructive, and you must kill it every time it raises itself up. Favoritism is horrible, and it's what got him in trouble. Ultimately, the brothers decided not to kill him, but to sell him to a caravan of traders that were going by. Not quite as bad as murder, but pretty bad. Terribly bad. So imagine Joseph, he gets up one morning, he's the favorite son of his father, and in the afternoon he's walking behind a camel, his hands chained together, headed for Egypt for the rest of his life. Unpleasant circumstances. Look at verse 1 of chapter 39. Verse 1. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an Egyptian officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the bodyguard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. All right. Let's stop for a moment and ask, what would you do if you were in this situation? Number one, you're being led in chains behind this camel on the way down to Egypt. What would you do? What options would you have? Try to escape? Break your chains? Escape? Run off into the desert? No friends, no money, no resources. That's not really an option. Finally get to Egypt and you're taken, you're hauled onto an auction block, you're bought, you're chained up again, brought to this household, and now you're a slave. And of course they're going to protect their investment, not let you escape. Do you have any options? I see three things, or rather just two things that Joseph had control of at this point. And the one was his faith in God, and the other was his ability to work. Those are only two things he really had control over. And what did he do? He clung to his faith in God, and he worked as hard as he could. He took the only two things that he had, and he absolutely put them to the best use that he could put them. Didn't slump down in depression and give up. And he said, okay, I've got two things. I'll take those two things and do the very best I can on them. And that's the first thing we learn. Well, let's see the result of that first. The result of that, verses 3 through 6. Verse 3, now his master saw that the Lord was with him, and how the Lord caused all that he did to prosper in his hand. Could I just stop for a second here? I wasn't planning on saying this. Do you see the word Lord there? And twice in verse 3. It's all capitals in probably most of your Bibles. Do you see that? If you don't know this, this is God's personal name. This is the name Yahweh. This is the name that God gave to Moses at the burning bush. I am that I am. Okay, Yahweh is what God's personal name is. And it's always bugged me because when I took Hebrew in seminary and translated, I took the whole book of the Bible, and so I learned this, and then I realized whenever that is all capitals in our English Bibles, that's God's name, Yahweh. So why doesn't it say God's name? For some reason, English translators have gone and sided with Judaism. Judaism won't pronounce the God's name. They feel like it's not appropriate to say God's name. If we say it in an appropriate way or a lighthearted way, we'll dishonor God. So they say Lord. They do not say his name. Well, that carried over into English translators. So here you have Christians who are not Jews at all in Judaism. We're in Christianity, and it's carried over into our Bible translations. But if you could read the Hebrew, it says, verse 3, now his master saw that Yahweh was with him, and how Yahweh caused all that he did to prosper in his hands. That's God's personal name. There's a personal connection there. God wants that personal connection with us. In other words, he doesn't want us calling him Lord alone. But he gives us his first name. Imagine you were called to go to talk to King Charles of England. He used to be Prince Charles, now he's King Charles of England. And how would you address him? You'd say, Your Majesty, you're king. It's a very, big deal over there to do that. But what if he said, hey, call me Charles? That would be a big deal, right? Our Creator, God King, is saying, call me by my first name. Call me Yahweh. Don't call me King. I mean, you can, that's no problem, but I'm giving you permission to call me by my first name because I want a love relationship with you that's really close. So that's why it's always bothered me when you see Lord in all caps. I do this, I just read it Yahweh. The personal, loving, caring Yahweh is who this is talking about. So I just want to use that as you read through the Old and the New Testament. You'll find that over and over again. Just say Yahweh instead of Lord. That's the way God intended it to be. For some reason, they've changed it. I don't understand why. Anyway, none of that was planned. Let's go. Verse 4. So Joseph found favor in his sight, Potiphar's sight, and became his personal servant. And he made him overseer of his house, and all that he owned he put in his charge. It came about that from the time he made him overseer in his house and over all that he owned, Yahweh blessed the Egyptian's house on account of Joseph. Thus Yahweh's blessings was upon all that he owned in the house and in the field. So he left everything he owned in Joseph's charge, and with him there he did not concern himself with anything except the food which he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. So Joseph took this unpleasant circumstance and gave God his very best, and what does it result in? Great things. And that teaches us the first life skill that we can copy that Joseph did right when we have bad circumstances. Number one, in your insert, when you have unpleasant circumstances, number one, become the best you can be for God. Become the best you can be for God. After I graduated from seminary out in California in, 1987, I graduated, now I can be a pastor, and so I sent out applications all across the United States for churches that were needing pastors, and sent. And months and months and months went by, and no response. Nobody was interested. And meanwhile, I was working in a flower shop in the shipping department, shipping flowers all over the United States. And not real happy about that. I mean, come on. I finally can be a pastor, and there's all these closed doors, and I was frustrated and wanted to get going and not have to work in a flower shop. So I remember one day I was walking down the hall of a building and just praying as I was walking along, saying, Lord, please get me out of here. Please let me start my life, and I can finally be a pastor. And as I ended the prayer, I looked up, and there was a poster on the wall in front of me, and it said, bloom where you're planted. And I went, no, it's not what I want to hear. I realized it was not God's plan for me to be a pastor. It was God's plan for me to be the best shipper of flowers in the world. That was what I was supposed to be doing, and I didn't want to hear it. But he was very similar. Joseph was in a situation he did not want to be in, obviously. What did he do? He didn't just crumple down in a heap and mourn and cry. He probably did, but that's not where he left himself. He said, if I'm going to be a slave, I'm going to be the best slave there is. And he did. And God gave him such great success, enormous success. And God would say the exact same thing to you and me. What is it God wants you to be right now? You might want to be planted somewhere else, in your job or your school or relationships or it doesn't matter. You want to be somewhere else, but you can't. God would say, yes, pray for change. Yes, seek opportunities for change. But until the change happens, be the very best you can be for God where you are right now. Be the best spouse you can be. Be the best wife you can be. Be the best husband you can be. Be the best student you can be. Be the best employee in the company. That's what God says to do. That's what Joseph did. Don't fight, kick, scream, complain, gripe your way through it. That's the way the world responds. Because they don't see that there is a good end in mind. God is saying, I'm only doing this to make you strong. But if you gripe, complain, kick, and scream, and yell, you're not going to get there. Be like Joseph. Admit you're unhappy, you don't like this is not what you want, but then take it and be the very best person you can be in those circumstances. Can you do that today? Can you think of a way you can be better? Can you think of an attitude you need to kill? Can you think, I could do better at this, and this way. God says, do that. If I took a raise of hands, probably most of the people would say in this room, they're in a spot they don't want to be right now. Some spot that they don't want. You're not alone if you're in a spot you don't want to be. Pray for change, seek change, but until the change comes, be the best, the very best you can be there. That's what God would have to say to you. All right, that's the first life skill. Let's look at a second life skill. As Joseph gave his best to God, it says that Potiphar noticed and realized, wow, I got to give this guy more and more responsibility. He gives him more and more and more and more until finally he's running everything. All that Potiphar had to worry about when he got out of bed in the morning was, what am I going to eat today? Everything else was taken care of by Joseph. This slave, he kind of stumbles in one day. He ends up running everything because he put his heart and soul into his job. Potiphar is impressed. And notice, verse 3 says, Potiphar knew exactly why it was happening. He didn't say, I've got the most intelligent guy I've ever met. Look at verse 3. It says, now his master saw that Yahweh was with him, and how Yahweh caused all that he did to prosper in his hands. God's blessing was on Joseph, and Potiphar knew it was God's blessing and kept promoting him. Never before had the slaves been better. Never before had the servants been better. Never before had the crops been better. Never before had the business side and the financial side of his life been better. And he said, I recognize this is a great guy, but beyond, underneath and doing all this was God. He recognized that. Now, how did Potiphar know? It doesn't say. Maybe you saw Joseph praying on a regular basis. Maybe he actually asked Joseph, how are you so successful? However he learned it, it was absolutely clear to Potiphar, this is because of Joseph's God. And that's the second life skill that we can learn through this, and that is, in your insert, give credit to God for each success. Give credit to God for each success. God's intention is that the way we live and the things we do that are really good make him look good. Make him look good. It says this over and over again. Matthew 5:16. Let your light so shine before men. Why? That they may see your good works and what? Not glorify you, glorify your Father who's in heaven. God gets the credit for your good works. 1 Peter 3:12. Live such good lives among the ungodly that even though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God. God gets the credit. That's the way God intended it. So if your job is unpleasant, you be the best employee, school, best student, marriage, best spouse. And then when someone says, you're doing really well, you must make sure that God gets the credit for it. You say something like, well, thank you. I've not always been this way. God has really changed me. That's one thing you could say. You could say, thank you for the compliment. I couldn't do it without God's help. Find some way to give God the credit. That doesn't mean you have to take every compliment and make a God speech about it. That doesn't what it means. But when it is appropriate, tell people why you're different. The reason that you are the way you are. Give God the credit. A lot of Christians are shy and want to hold back and don't want to stand out and just kind of blend in. And not Joseph. Joseph was very clear to let people know somehow that God was the reason for his great success. We need to make sure we do that. Make sure you're doing that. Can you think of, and maybe you can practice in your head, the next time someone compliments me for something that I tend to get compliments for, what could you say that would point to God? Come up with something, and then be bold to do it. It can be a little scary, but do it. Joseph did. And it was a skill that got him through to grow strong in his hardship. He gave the credit to God. All right, a third life skill. As it happens, oftentimes after we have great success, Joseph had a great attack. You'll notice that in life. You're doing something that goes really well in your life, Satan usually doesn't like that and follows it up with an attack on you, especially if you're giving credit to God. Look at verse 7. It came about after these events that his master's wife looked with desire at Joseph. And she said, lie with me. But he refused and said to his master's wife, behold, with me here, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house, but he has put all that he owns in my charge. there is no one greater in this house than I, and as he has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife, how then could I do this great evil and sin against God? And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he did not listen to her, to lie beside her, or to be with her. So Potiphar was not the only one impressed with Joseph. Verse 6 says that Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. NIV says he was well built. Potiphar's wife noticed and pressed him to commit adultery. And this would have been a powerful temptation. Number one, because he was a man, and any man with a woman throwing herself at them would tempt any man. Number two, it was powerful because of her persistence. It said it was day after day after day. Saying no to a powerful temptation once is a great victory, but over time you can get worn down, give in. And undoubtedly she not only tempted him with her words, but also with her clothes, or lack of clothes. Number three was powerful because of a lack of supervision going on in Joseph's life. Obviously Potiphar wasn't going to be around when she was saying this. He had no parents around to hold him accountable. He had no pastor around to say something. There was no one around to watch over him and make sure he did the right thing, except God. And that's exactly what kept him in line. He realized, he says to her in verse 9, how can I do this thing and sin against God? Parents, please teach that to your young children early. You want to teach your young kids, obviously, to obey you because we're mom and dad. But quickly add to that and transfer that to God to say, look, does God like the way you just spoke to me? What does God think about that? Are you listening to God or are you listening to Satan right now? Early in their life, transfer it over to God is watching, not just your parents, because then what happens when your parents aren't there? But God is always there. And adults, we need to remember that. Your supervisor may not be watching, but God is watching. We need to remember that. Joseph remembered that here in Egypt, and it kept him from giving in to powerful temptation. He knew he could not get away with his sin because God was watching. And yes, it was tempting, and yes, he would likely not get caught by people. And yes, God would probably forgive him if he asked for forgiveness afterwards, but he would not wound God that way. He said, look, God has made clear his commands. I know right is right and wrong is wrong, and this is wrong, and I'm not doing it. And so this gives us a third life skill of growing strong in our hardships, and that is in your inserts. Look out for temptation when you're successful. Look out for temptation when you're successful. We can all probably think of examples of people who had great success, and the next thing they know, they did something stupid and fell into ruin. I can think of a couple, we see these celebrities lifted up, whether it's sports or whether it's, movies or whatever powerful position people get to. And it's not long before a lot of them fall in some disgraceful, terrible way. It's because of this principle. Temptation comes when you are successful. 1 Corinthians 10:12. Let the one who thinks he stands watch out that he does not fall. Success is a great thing, but it can also become a terrible thing when you allow it to go to your head. So you said, I did this great thing, that means I'm great. And then you stop being careful because you're so great and successful. It is at the very moment that you are successful that God says you need to watch out, that you don't fall into ruin. When you're most successful, that's the most vulnerable moment in your life that you could so easily fall, is what God is saying. Because you can let it go to your head. I got it made. I'm a success. And Satan says, great, because I can topple successes in a moment. Joseph could have let this happen to him. He was experiencing great success. He said, this entire household is run by me. There's nothing I'm not in charge of except Potiphar's food. He could have let that go to his head and says, look, I'm a successful man, so I could give in to this temptation to his wife. I mean, would Potiphar mind that badly? Or you could say, I'm a successful man. I can certainly resist this temptation easily. He did not say that. In fact, it says there regarding her temptations that he not only said no, he would not even be alone with her. So she'd come into the room and he'd leave. Why? Why are you doing that, Joseph? Because he didn't let his success go to his head and think that, I can handle this. Joseph's attitude was, I can't handle this. So I'm getting out of here when she comes into the room. To kill temptation, you must constantly realize that you're vulnerable to temptation. Let me repeat that. To kill temptation, you must constantly realize you're vulnerable to temptation. When you stop feeling that, man, you're ready to be ruined. 1 Peter 5:8 says, be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls about like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Just shorten that. Your adversary, the devil, seeks to devour you, to destroy you. And he's smarter than you, and he's more powerful than you, and he's got thousands of years of experience taking people down, and he's after you to destroy you. Why is Peter telling us this? Because he wants us walking around realizing there is a real threat on our lives in the devil, and we've got to be careful. It's when we stop feeling vulnerable to Satan that we are the most vulnerable to Satan. Let me repeat that. When we stop feeling vulnerable to Satan is when we are the most vulnerable to Satan. We are to walk around feeling vulnerable to sin. Okay? But not stop there. Walk around feeling vulnerable and let that vulnerability drive you to pray and to wear the armor of God and to run from temptation. Then you can conquer it. That's how you conquer Satan and his temptations. Pray hard, wear the armor of God, and run from temptation. Joseph knew this, and this is what made him this third life skill, why he was so strong. He realized to look out for temptation when he was successful. You must too. Can you think of an area that you are being complimented for, that you feel successful in? Maybe right now you're doing really well on the job and you're being, praised for it. Maybe it's your school. Maybe it's your finances are going well. Your marriage is going well. Whatever area that you are doing well in right now, put flashing warning lights over that area. Danger. It's really easy to fall now in that area. Don't take things for granted. Realize that Satan's after you, sin is after you, and let that drive you to Christ. To pray hard, to wear the armor of God, and to run from temptation. Are you doing that? If you're sitting here and you're thinking, no, I'm not really taking temptation that seriously, that's exactly what Satan wants you to do. Take every temptation seriously. Pray hard, wear the armor of God, and run from that temptation, just like Joseph. That was one of his life skills for getting through successfully. All right. After this came the final showdown. Verse 11. Now it happened one day that when he went into the house to do his work, and suddenly none of the other men of the household were there inside, she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and went outside. So this lustful woman becomes desperate and grabs Joseph to force him into adultery. But he runs from the room, leaving behind his cloak, and now she uses it to ruin him. Look at verse 13. When she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled outside, she called to the men of her household and said to them, see, her husband has brought in a Hebrew to us to make sport of us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I screamed. And when he heard that I raised my voice and screamed, he left his garment beside me and fled and went outside. And so she left his garment beside her. She doesn't move it. She stays there, leaves the garment beside her until the master came home. So Joseph does the right and honorable thing and just runs away, and she's outraged by his refusal. And now she's going to use his garment against him to get back. Verse 19. Now when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spoke to him, saying, this is what your slave did to me, his anger burned. So Joseph's master took him and put him into jail, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in jail. Under normal circumstances, Joseph would have been immediately killed. He's a piece of property. and he would have been immediately killed, but obviously God was involved. But also from a human perspective, Potiphar probably suspected his wife was up to no good. He knew Joseph's character was a man above reproach. He probably knew his wife was also a woman who was not above reproach. And yet, what could he do? He couldn't just ignore this and say, "Oh, no big deal." He couldn't just slap Joseph on the wrist. He had to do something, at least, even if he felt she was completely lying. So instead of executing him, he hasn't thrown in prison. This gives us one last life skill that we learn from Joseph's. And your inserts there. Expect to pay a price for resisting temptation. Expect to pay a price for resisting temptation. It would be great if every time you said no to temptation, a band played and people came out and carried you around on their shoulders. Wouldn't that be nice? That's not what normally happens. Sometimes other people will notice. Most times, no one notices, or they do notice and they hate you for it because you resisted temptation. Try telling your boss that you're not going to lie on the report that he gives you. Try telling your coworkers that you're not going to join them in the raunchy movie they are all going out to see. Try telling your coworkers you don't want to hear the latest office gossip that's going around. And you will find that there's a price to pay for resisting temptation. People don't like that. Joseph resists what every young man in Egypt would have eagerly said yes to. And he pays for it. He's put in jail. And Satan's right there saying, "Hey, Joseph, look what this got you. You stood up and did the right thing, and now you're suffering in jail. You should have just given in. What good was what you did? That was terrible." And what was God saying to Joseph? Well done, Joseph. Right? Joseph, you know that you cannot sin and prosper. Joseph, you know that I'm always watching you. And Joseph, you knew it's better to be in jail for doing the right thing than a free man and do the wrong thing. You paid the price for saying no to temptation. Temptation comes at you and me every single day, and it will cost us to say no to it. You must say no, but it comes with a price. That's why most people won't say no. I don't want to pay that price. If I stand up and do the right thing here, it could cost me my job. It could cost me a friendship. It could embarrass me. Someone could sue me. Whatever it might be. Are you being tempted to do something wrong right now? Number one, kill that temptation and say no to it. Number two, brace yourself for the consequences. Accept the consequences. It'd be nice if God just erased all the consequences. I'm going to say no, do the right thing, and now there's no consequences, just bands playing. You look at people in the Bible, most of the people in the Bible who stand up and do the right thing end up paying for it. John the Baptist loses his head. John is the first, or James is the first martyr. Stephen stoned to death. Standing up and doing exactly what God wants them to do, 11 of the disciples were killed for it. There are terrible consequences in the short run for standing up and doing the right thing. But God says, don't focus on the short run. Focus on the long run, where you stand in front of me and I say, well done, good and faithful servant. Here's your rich rewards for what you did. Don't look at the short run if you are experiencing the consequences. That's painful and it's hard, and yes, your life has gotten worse for the moment, but it's going to end in a much better place. You'll be stronger and your life will be richer and Christ will be pleased. So the fourth life lesson to learn here, life skill, is expect temptation is going to cost you, but be willing to pay it anyway. So this morning, most of us in this room are probably undergoing some sort of unpleasant circumstance, but we can master the skill of growing strong in it, not just holding on in it, growing strong in it. If we listen to what Joseph learned here, let's review them. Number one, in the hardship you are going through, are you giving your best to be your best in that situation, to be the best spouse, best student, best employee that you can be? That's how if you do that, you come out strong. If you gripe and complain and whine and kick and scream your way through it, you will not come out strong. And God will have to come up with another thing to put you through to get you strong. You will shorten your pain if you just do the right thing. Otherwise, you have to keep going through different versions of the same lesson for God to make you strong. Make sure today, yes, seek God for change. Look for open opportunities to change, but until the change comes, make sure that you are being the very best you can be in that situation. Take the things you can control, like Joseph, and be outstanding with them. Can you do that? Can you think of a way you can do that? Do that. Whatever your circumstances, give God your best in it, and you'll come out a strong person. Number 2, if you're having success, are you giving God credit for it? Do the other people around you know that? First of all, are you admitting that to yourself? The reason I'm successful at school or job or finances, whatever, is only because God has shining his light of blessing upon me. There are plenty of people who've done exactly what you've done and no visible success because God wasn't prospering it for whatever reason. And not necessarily because they were disobedient. God just says, no, that's not time for you to be successful. If you're experiencing success, it's because God has opened that door and given that to you. Recognize that to yourself first, but then also give people credit for that too. As I said, practice ahead of time. What you'll say next time when someone says, you're a really good student. Or, man, you're doing your job really well today. You got a good attitude. What can you say to give God credit for that? Come up with something. And then be bold to say it. Give God credit. That's what Joseph did, and it made him strong. Number 3, if you're having success, are you looking out for attacks from temptation? Because Satan hates it when you're successful and give credit to God, so he's going to attack you to try to get you to stop. Are you facing a temptation today that you need to say no to and you've been sloppy about? As I've been speaking here, as God laid his finger on something in your life, says you need to say no to that. Then tell God you're sorry. Confess it, and then make sure you kill that. Kill it. And then number 4, are you prepared to pay the price for killing that temptation? God honors your refusal to give in to sin. God honors that, but most people don't, and they won't. So brace yourself to be attacked, but keep your eyes on the long run. You will be hurt and suffer loss in the short run, but in the long run, man, you can't begin to understand how much reward and pleasure to God you are bringing and will receive when you stand before him. So it's worth it, even though it will cost. Giving into sin is never worth it. Standing true to God is always worth it. All right, so did God speak to you in any way this morning? Say yes to him. Say yes to him. Don't look at yourself in the mirror and see that you've got a smudge on your face and your hair's messed up and then just walk out of here. Fix your hair, wash your face before you leave this room, in a spiritual sense. And then go out. And then with your new, bright appearance, go serve someone today. These are the 4 life skills from the life of Joseph, and we want to master these. Work at mastering.